Once upon a time, in the lands of the Pharaoh, lived a young man. His name was Asan, which means beautiful of body and soul. His mother had named him Asan as a blessing because she wanted him to be a good man. She was disappointed because instead of a good, brave, hard-working son, she had a daydreamer. He didn't do anything except playing on his flute all day. Not even a good flute, a flute that he made himself out of canes. And he had no talent. I mean, he played all day, so he was getting better. He was even good, but he was not born for it. She wished he would work one day of his life. So he asked people around in the village to give him jobs to do. But whenever someone chased him with a piece of work to be done, he would run faster than the wind, find a corner, hide and play his flute. Because of these running and hiding, he had found the best hiding spot. A tall wall, on top of which he had a beautiful view on one side of the city and on the other side of a green garden, beautiful, filled with plants and crossed by the river, a snake of silver water. The first time he got there, it was almost sunset and the colors were warm as blood. He started playing on his flute, and soon enough he saw a woman walking in the garden towards the river. She never looked in his direction. She sat on a rock and started combing her black raven hair with a silver comb. At first he got scared, but as she never raised her eyes to him, he thought that she couldn't hear him. So he began playing to his heart's content. Well, he kind of grew fond of these meetings that kept happening every day at sunset. He would try to be there in time, not to let the woman waste as if she was his audience, but not to wait too long for her to come. And every day he would play what his heart suggested. Soon enough, he realized that he was in love with that beautiful skin, that silky dress, and those black raven hair, even with the comb and the hand combing through it. So he asked around about this beautiful woman, and he found out that the wall and the garden belonged to the Pharaoh. And the beautiful woman was no one else but the daughter of the Pharaoh, the princess. And for the first time, he was not happy about being a daydreamer, a musician, because a daydreamer cannot have the princess. She would only marry a warrior, a brave, cruel man. So he decided to go to the desert. He prepared few things, just something to eat, something to drink, and his flute. And off he went to the dunes. He walked for days and nights, eating very little, drinking enough not to faint, but never stopping for a rest, under the sun, the smoldering heat, or the heart-wrenching cold of the night. And after 3 days and 3 nights, he finally found the tent of the wizard. He pushed aside the door of the tent. His heart was pounding against his chest. His lips were parched by days of not drinking, his eyes swollen by the light reflected on the dunes. So he needed a moment to adapt to the darkness and the room filled with smoke, when finally he could see. he saw the wizard. Old as an old tree, his face covered in wrinkles, his eyes intent as those of a cat. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want my soul changed." "I can do it, but that magic has a price. I will pay whatever you want, the thing that you love most. That's what I want." A son expected it, and that's why he had his flute. So he reached to his pocket and offered it to the wizard. "Be careful, young man. With that flute you give away the ability to play it and any other instrument of that kind." But Hassan did not falter. "Be careful, young man. When I change a soul, I cannot change it back." But Hassan was sure that what he was doing was right, so he reached out with his flute, and the wizard took it. 3 years later, life had changed quite a bit. In town, no one wondered what happened to Hassan. They thought he died, maybe drowned in the river. His mother, well, she cried, yes, but she was also relieved. One thing that changed the most, well, the kingdom was now at war, and the Pharaoh was losing ground day after day. The enemy was nearer and nearer and nearer to the city walls. But the Pharaoh didn't know what to do. He had lost so many champions, so many commanders, until one day, out of the desert, came running a rider on a black horse, dressed in black silk. He ran through town like an arrow. He reached the palace, jumped off his horse, and ran to the Pharaoh. There he knelt and said, "Majesty, let me guide your army. Let me be the general, and I will give you victory." The Pharaoh was surprised. This young man, there was something in his eyes, in his posture, the eyes of a falcon, of an auk, and the dangerous way of moving of a lion. He looked at his man and he saw hope. So he accepted and sent this black prince to the battlefront. There, he won. He won big, he won fast, and soon enough, in a few weeks, the enemy was pushed away, far away. The Pharaoh couldn't be happier, and when the Black Prince came back to the palace, the Pharaoh jumped up from his seat, he clapped his hands and said, "My friend, ask freely, for today what you ask you will get." The Black Prince didn't smile and said, "Majesty, I know what I want, and what I always wanted. Give me your daughter in marriage." The Pharaoh smiled and nodded towards his daughter. The princess stood up and said, "Father, if you want me to marry this man, I will. But let me tell you my story. I loved once, years ago, a young musician who would come every day at sunset at my wall, and he would play my soul with his flute. His music was so pure that only a good heart could create it, only a beautiful soul imagine it. I loved that man, and he died drowned in the river 3 years ago. I swore that I will never love another man. So if you want me to, I will marry this stranger, but I will never love him." At these words, the Black Prince faltered and stepped back, and then said, "Princess, I know the kind of love you're talking about. For I loved as truly and deeply. I will not force you in a marriage with no love. And after that, he left the palace. And on his feet, he journeyed to the desert, looking for the tent of the wizard. But as far as I know, he never found it.